Thank you. So that is a true story, but thanks to the ceaseless efforts of psychologists' global outreach program, their ambassador, Celia, convinced me to like one psychologist, and I still despise all lawyers. All right, so that, God, oh my God, that image is a swamp, and I saw a lot of these over the course of making this game. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about the journey. Life takes you unexpected places, but love always brings you home. Now, when I was a kid, I knew I wanted to make video games. My Commodore 64 and I were in constant communion. I taught myself how to design, program, push pixel art, compose, write assembly code, and animate. And I knew this is what I wanted to do. And this was in the era when EA had just sort of rebranded the entire industry so that game developers were now celebrities. You may remember that from your history classes. And you know, it was a time of Mule and Archon and Hard Hat Mac and all those sorts of games. And I absolutely knew that's what I wanted to do. So I told my parents, Mom, I'm going to make video games. And she was very thoughtful and paused to put things politely to me. And she said, now, David, why don't you get a real job so that you can make a living? You should work for the phone company, or you should sell insurance. Yeah, and that's not what I wanted to do. So a couple of years later, when I had enrolled in university, I entered as a computer science major, because in those days there were no game development curriculum. They did not exist. And I think a lot of people thought games were just going to fade away eventually. So I enrolled as a computer science student to learn coding and eventually write the Grail, write your own, language compiler. So I told my advisor in the computer science department what I wanted to do for a living after college, and he got very quiet and thoughtful. And then, putting it as politely as he could, he told me that I should program for the phone company or an insurance company. And it wasn't too long after that, and one assignment about simulating a parking garage environment, I knew programming was not going to be the path for me. So I did the only sane thing and pivoted to a super useful major, English literature. And eventually I added a radio, television, and film, second major, with an overall interest in creative writing, which was pretty good at my university. Unfortunately, I forgot I wanted to make games, and it wasn't until much, much later, 5 years or so, I realized that's what I would be doing. So it happened. I got my break, which is a whole other presentation, and I did a lot of things, but over many, many years, I started to feel the call of home. And this became South of Midnight, ultimately, which was indeed a miracle. So I grew up in multiple states in the South, mostly in Mississippi. And if you knew me back in 1991, you would ask me, why would you go back, ever? And it's because the South has been underrepresented in games, and I'm always looking for a new territory or culture to explore and give back to the world. So I was born in Florida, 3 blissful years in North Carolina, and then back to my mother's home state, Mississippi. You may notice the color choice is all red, and it hasn't really changed. So there is the there's also the concept of the Bible Belt, maps very, very closely to the color here. And then there's Mississippi, which it is the buckle on the Bible Belt. This was a place where I didn't get to watch Star Trek because it was considered satanic. So, as you can imagine, I was not entirely happy there. I was definitely different. And this is, this is a wild place. It's full of like truly giant monsters, like Hogzilla and giant alligators and giant alligator snapping turtles. So it's easy to understand how all of these sightings could inspire all of the folklore that is in the South. And while the rest of the world doesn't know specifically about what we have in the South, we have our own cryptids. But everywhere else in the world, in a sort of Joseph Campbellian sense of, sort of archetypical creatures around the world, they're recognizable instantly. It's just our version, the Southern version. So anyway, I spent a lot of my time as a kid, when I wasn't programming and making games at home, I was out wandering. I went basically just on the other side of our subdivision, which had flattened countless acres of farmland and old-growth forest. But around the edges of this subdivision, it was still wild. And the further I went, the wilder it got. Strange plants I've never seen before, giant wild grapevines that you could not only climb, they were large enough to walk up. All sorts of strange animal tracks and noises, and this bizarre tree to which someone had hammered hundreds of doll heads. So I've never forgotten this, and that did not make it into the game, as I imagined. It is in there. So I knew it was a strange place. It's a place where people still unconsciously practice superstitions. Every once in a while, you'll see a mailbox that's been painted yellow because it's a lucky color, and no bad news can ever be delivered to you if you paint your mailbox yellow. We also paint our porch roofs, porch ceilings blue, and in the South, this is also known as haint blue, which is something we borrowed from Caribbean culture, and it scares away the haints, these demonic, invisible entities that wish you harm. Haints can't cross blue. So, we also have a vast, vast amount of unusual terrain across, remember all those red states. We have some of the most interesting terrain in the United States, but it's not popularized. And I wanted to be able to put this in a game so other people could see this and appreciate what I had seen. Oh, yeah, this guy. So you may have picked up that while cynical, I'm also very naive. And in 8th grade, I very proudly told our civics/history teacher that I was distantly related, a great-great-great-great-grandson or similar, to General Sherman. And if you don't know, General Sherman, on his march to the sea during the Civil War, burned everything. He burned plantations, he burned the capital city of Mississippi, which was only 3 miles away. And afterwards it was known as Chimneyville, because all that was left was chimneys. So I thought, wow, this is interesting. You should, embrace the history that I'm sharing with you. They were not pleased at all. So I went from being invisible to being bullied even more because I was so strange. I read books, I wandered, I programmed. At my very first opportunity, I left. As soon as I I was in a journalism gig situation in North Carolina for about a year. Less than a year after that, they shut down. I moved to California because I had gotten my break. And this, of course, was where the majority of entertainment industry, whether games or films or TV, were located. So I knew only good things would happen. Yeah. I grew to miss this stuff. The tree climbing alligators, the bottle trees for capturing spirits, the beautiful landscaping that's often on the verge of ruin or being chaotic and out of control. cultural phenomena such as the honky tonk. I don't know if you know what those are. Well, we can talk later, but the good and bad business goes down in a honky tonk. So when Compulsion and Microsoft gave me a shot to make something that I wanted to make, and this is rare, as we all know, in the games industry, who says, what do you want to make? Okay, make it. I knew it had to be Southern, monstrous, magical, and authentic. I wanted to share with players the feeling of wonder that I had when I was wandering. I felt like anything could happen. I had conversations with monsters that I had made up, and they became my friends. And I wanted to bring some of this mystery, this childlike wonder that was just over the fence and through the woods to everyone else that plays games. And it had taken 30 years for me to fall back in love with the South, and now I needed to convince a bunch of French Canadians to do this in a whole lot less time. So this was what I grew up with. It was alien to a lot of people on our team. We had a few Southerners, which was great because they got it immediately. Other people were more skeptical. But I knew that because there are so few games set in the South, that Southern players would call us out on authenticity immediately, and they would say, you never get it right, stop making games about the South. All 2 of them have been failures. I was so enchanted and charmed by the lure of the South 32 years later. I wanted to buy a house in the South. You know, I desperately wanted a place to retire to. I had to have some place to go. So I bought a house off the internet. This house was missing parts of the roof, parts of the floor, some of the exterior walls, and a whole lot more. This is a warning. Don't do this. But to make matters worse, I made this purchase from Montreal. This is in North Carolina. I made this purchase just before the pandemic. Oh yeah. And I had come down here, still working on midnight, but I had some time off, so I'm gonna go work on my house. I was trapped there for 5 months because we couldn't travel. And we got a lot done, but that was not the intention. Okay, so I didn't want to make a really long game. I didn't want to make a really difficult to play game. I wanted to give people a story and that sense of wonder I had been talking about. And I wanted to make it accessible, but I wanted to connect emotionally. And I wanted to sort of future-proof it so it would stand the test of time. So no one in 10 years would say, oh, I really like the story, but the graphics are terrible. So we went with an exaggerated, crafted, painterly sort of look. And that's why. So I'm gonna, because I already saw the poll earlier, I think only one person besides you and I played the game. So I'm gonna show you the teaser trailer that we put together for this game. Hopefully it will work. Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much. This trailer was definitely a labor of love, but it was also the result of a mad panic. So I'm like, oh, it's going well. It must be going well, because in later years, as a creative director, the teams have become larger. So I worked through a series, or like a regiment of lieutenants and captains. So, you know, I didn't always get, I didn't know what was going on in absolutely every part of the project, because there would be a presentation later, so I would catch up. So I heard that we needed to get this out the door. We'd already been working on it for 5 weeks or something like that. And I was like, well, what do you have? And they're like, well, we don't have anything. And I'm like, what have you been doing? So, and this is great because, I always look for ways I can make something in the game or push something over the edge in the game. And the animation director and I went into our motion capture studio, and then I ad-libbed this thing, which is not to say that everyone else did all the heavy lifting, but I was like, what does she sound like? How does she walk? Where's the humor? And that sort of thing. And we did it pretty quickly, and then the trailer came out. People really loved it, and it won a Clio, and I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? I just want to make this game. Don't make me make any more trailers. Now, while this is what I had been seeing in my head for a long time, many months, this was the first time the entire team and Microsoft saw what we were making. And I looked at it and I said, well then, just make 9 hours and 57 minutes more just like this. I'll be in my office. But so how did we actually get there, right? And I'm going to share my creative director approach that I found works pretty well. And I always ask, you're familiar with the concept of pillars, of course. But I thought, why not make those questions? So people are already in the mental state to ask themselves the questions that I am posing. And each of the questions is a pillar. The more questions you can say when you want to contribute a piece of content, a feature, mechanic, whatever, dialogue, ask yourself, how many of these questions does it answer positively, affirmatively? If it's 4, probably we should make room for it, even and kick out some that only had 3 positive answers. If it's 3, it's a good candidate. If it's 2, if we have time. 1 probably won't happen. Thanks for trying. We'll put it in another game one day in the future. So these were the 4 questions for me. They are very visibly present in the game. So I think you can reverse engineer it if you needed to. First question was, is this Southern Gothic? Melodramatic storylines, exaggerated characters, tragic endings that begin badly and then somehow get worse in unexpected ways, and then the weight of the past. In the South, there's definitely a feeling the past has not happened, we're still living it. So all this is pretty heavy for a game, and I wanted to make sure that we were true to the tenets of Southern Gothic, particularly because it flirts with the supernatural through its use of magical realism. So there are straight up ghost stories in Southern Gothic. So that was an entree to using creatures, using cryptids and magic in the game. So within Southern Gothic, oops, I think I skipped a slide. Okay. Is this class struggle? Second question. Are we looking at class expressed through the things we say, the way we say them, where we live, how we live, what we wear, or what we don't? This becomes pretty important in the game later. Right. Oh, good. I did it. So when a storm is coming, and they often do in the South, we have a lot of hurricanes, some people have a second house in the country that's on high ground, and that's where they can go, and they'll be fine. Some people do not. They live in the flood zone. They live on the edge of a swamp. They already have limited means, and now they have nowhere to go. And this is Hazel's story. Is this about esoteric talents? This was an opportunity to pull back the tapestry or the curtain and reveal the underlying mechanistic system of strands that make up the universe. Everything is connected. There are many forms of magic, but those are just different labels or branding of this primal sort of power that once in a generation, a weaver such as Hazel can tap into. Only she can see the strands, and only she can directly manipulate them. In the South, esoteric talents under the umbrella of magic. The farther you go from civilization or from your small town, the more magic the world becomes. the more unsettling the sounds, the more gigantic the plant life, and this is where you start to encounter the cryptids. So, fourth question, is this about truth and hope? And in many ways, this is the most important question. I wanted to make sure that at the end of the game, the player has at least seen the main character become a better version of herself. And most important of all, a headstrong young woman has learned that even though she has all of these heroic powers, you should not put good on people. You do good with people. You listen enough to develop empathy, and then you help if you're asked in the way they ask you to help. You do not own their suffering, they do, and they will let you know how to help. So, okay, this guy. This is Itchy, and he's not a cryptid, although he's pretty close. This guy is one of the surviving relatives in the story of Benji the Tree. And it's through the music, which tells a story, that I sort of bought the guarantee that no matter what happened in the level design, even if we had to cut out some gameplay or some content, the lyrics of the song would tell his tragic story. It would always tell this tragic story of how the creatures with human souls came to be monsters in the Deep South. So here you go. The 4 questions all over again, the sub-questions that help make it more specific if you need to refer to the cheat sheet. So this is easily remembered by developers. It really is. And pretty soon, once it's become part of the discourse with all of the directors, it's second nature, right? They deploy the messaging and this vision to everyone else on the dev team. And that's great. Except, it's not enough. You have to do more to make the game special. And this takes many forms of extracurricular activities, as I like to call them, or other important considerations. So, good stories persist. Start there. Choose folktales that have been around forever. Tell the story of the haints that my grandmother used to terrify me with when I was 6 years old. These stories are a great start because they've already endured 200 years or 300 years. But the best part about these stories is there's very few televised interviews with cryptids, and we don't know what they really look like or what they want. So you can see the Altamaha, supposedly, in the Altamaha River in Georgia, and what we did. This became a story about separating a mother and a child. And you don't get that from Nessie, right? It's very, very different. And you also, for this game, remember that tragedy leaves room for comedy. Comedy is part of my DNA, obviously, for better or worse, and it is part of Compulsion's DNA. Lean into it. All those heavy things in the 4 questions, comedy undercuts them and gives them contrast. So Hazel is funny on her own. She's very cynical. I don't know where she got it. And she's almost playful. And then that play happens again with the comedic sidekick of Crouton that you pick up sort of midway through the game, first third of the game. And you get to play him, and he's ridiculous. I mean, he runs like an idiot. He doesn't have feet. He's a stuffed animal, basically. But he gets into all kinds of trouble and helps Hazel, but those two together give us enough comedy to balance out all of the tragedy, which I find so delicious. So, yeah, humility is a big deal when you're making a game like this. I often think and sometimes say, oh, I know all about that, whatever it is. And in the early days, there's often a lot of trepidation on your team if you're tackling something that is really remotely removed from snow and maple syrup or whatever else, you know, the owl man in Quebec is one of the cryptids. Fortunately, there are lots of experts, and when you're funded, you can use them all. You can use every one of them that you want, and surprisingly, you get some good stories out of it too. This is Donna Washington. She's a professional storyteller. She keeps legends and folklore alive, travels all over the world, performing these stories in a very authentic and memorable way. So I and the team are always going to remember the story of Talipo that she told us when she came to visit us in Montreal. And her voice was extremely influential. It fed into the sort of cadence we wanted to have our storytelling. Lovely woman, totally jazzed the entire studio. They thought, oh, we must be making something pretty good. Donna Washington likes the idea. So what do you do when you know you need music, and you need diegetic music from this huge swath of the South? So everything from bluegrass to the blues originating in Mississippi, jazz in New Orleans, and everything in between. How are you going to represent that without just playing the music? Well, clearly, you have to hire a French composer, Olivier de Rivière, who is absolutely brilliant. He's a madman. And what he did to be authentic, he did all the research, of course, and then he pitched me. He gave me this really nice presentation about how the music would be approached, and I just sat there, and he's like, what is it? And I said, I don't want any music. I don't want just any music. I want music that, as the player plays, their actions build the musicality. And that's not something we talk about a lot in marketing the game, but it's in there, and it worked extremely well. I mentioned that each of the songs in the game, each of the creature themes for each of the regions or the kingdoms, they have lyrics that tell the story, the sad, sad story of each of the creatures. We tried writing these things. We didn't have any lyricists on the team. We reached out to hire appropriate lyricists or songwriters. They weren't available, so in the end, I wrote most of the lyrics. Now, this is not something I ever aspired to. I didn't know I could do it. It was extremely painful, but I was just glad it was over, because these were going to serve as the sort of concept art for the music in each zone. And then someone said, oh, we should just put let's just put the whole song in there with the vocals. And there was a chorus of, oh, you can't do that in games. But then somebody, possibly the audio director, put it in, and it just worked. So the lesson there is, it doesn't cost very much to try something that you can just turn on and off. And of course, when in doubt, just add banjo. There's banjo throughout this game. If it doesn't feel authentic, banjo. Folktales feature animals, right? And a lot of people would say, oh my goodness, that's a lot of animal models to build. That's a lot of creatures to animate. Why are they even in there? And it's because they're judgy. They will judge you. And this we see in the film Night of the Hunter. Our animals have more personality than what you see in Night of the Hunter, but they had rabbits. They had a spider. I think they had birds. They're straight up waiting to see what you, the player, and in the movie, these children, what are you going to do? Are you going to do the right thing? Are you going to do something stupid? Are you going to stay alive? But they're not going to help. They're going to watch. I also felt it was necessary to give all of the directors a real taste of the South, which turned into a baptism by fire. We flew to the South, and I had a very curated agenda of places to visit, a mixture of museums and abandoned places and cities that had fallen on hard times, and we went to the crossroads where the devil and Johnson, the blues player, the greatest blues player ever, made a deal, right? And we did. We went to those places. One of the places we went was the ghost town of Rodney, which, of course, being close to the Mississippi River, had flooded again. And I don't know what I was looking at, but it wasn't my game director, who, before I could stop him, had already waded, thigh deep across this water. And in the South, in floods, we know, don't go in the water. Anything could be in there. Anything. Something sharp. Something that will tangle your feet and you'll drown. Or there could be alligators, which there were. There were 3 alligators outside the frame of this picture. But he had already made it across, and I was like, okay, well, just get the pictures then. And again, in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, our audio director comes out of his hotel room in the morning, ready for coffee, walks straight into a black bear. It was around this point I realized my mission was not to give them a taste of the South. It was to prevent them being murdered by the South. All right, so in the game, there's a book of mysteries that I wrote. All these collected vignettes of the strange and mysterious, borderline supernatural places and events I noticed on my wanderings. I wrote it so that designers could put them in their levels, and some did make it. But we also have this lovely companion book which updates you on what happens in each of the kingdoms as you transition to the next kingdom to meet the next king or the cryptid. So the little mysteries aren't in here, but there is another book that informed the design of the game that we used internally. Which was that? Great. So we touched on the bottle trees. They're used to capture haints, boo hags, that sort of thing. Of course you know that. Each of these bottles represents the tragedy, the suffering, and the pain in each of the cryptids. And as you, Hazel, move through the world, you're healing it. You're getting rid of this corruption, right? Only you can see the corruption. It's allegorical. You can see the corruption if you want to. You don't have to be a weaver to see that things are bad, or things have been tragic, or people need help. But she doesn't actually commit any violent acts. She never draws blood or sets anyone on fire. She is using her weaver's tools to remove this corruption. The haints that you face in the game, they're made of corruption. They're from a mathematical, demonic, alternative dimension, and they come through into our world where there's suffering, where there's been injustice. So she fights these with the weaver's tool, but for the cryptid kings, she has to remove all of the corruption from their spiritual center. So, oh wow, emotional memory. There's a pig. There's a lot of pigs in this game. And there's only one pig that's alive. And you have to try to help save it. It's panicking. It's on a piece of debris out in the muddy water. You're not stupid. You're not going to walk into the water because that could kill you. And then the pig right in front of you is eaten alive by Two-Toe Tom, which is this giant albino necrotic alligator the size of an island, because obviously. And it's heart-wrenching. I was blown away when I saw it in the game. And then at the end of the mission, you've actually you fought the alligator, you've gone deep inside his belly through levels in the belly, and you and the pig are ultimately regurgitated back into the world. So you do get to save the pig. And some people would say, oh, no one needs that. That's too many details. I'm not 10-hour game, highly crafted. We want people to remember these emotional moments. So, there we go. Oh, this is awesome. The emotional memory over the course of a career. So I think all of this ended up in South of Midnight. I'm pretty happy with the emotional content that is there. But you know, I've been around a while, and when I started making games, academics were arguing games cannot make you feel strong emotions other than anger, which is still true. But there was a big debate over whether or not games could make you cry. Other people have proven that's true. Other people before me have proven that's true. But I do take very, very deep pleasure hearing how many people cried playing South of Midnight. And I could stop there because that was a fantastic goal for so long. And I've never been so happy to see so many tears. But really, this is all games that focus on a single emotion, right? A single strong emotion. All those questions, they're really in service to the one emotion you choose to build in your game. In my first game, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, made entirely by instinct. I had no idea what I was doing, but they let me do it anyway. That emotion was despair. If you don't know, 3 supercomputers, Russia, China, the US, come together, decide to exterminate all but 5 humans on the planet. This is scheduled to happen in 2027, I think, right? This is a warning against AI, and it's hopeless. But the AI are malevolent, and they keep 5 people alive to torture and resuscitate over and over again for all eternity. Despair. SOCOM. Oh man, that's like 3 presentations worth of material there. SOCOM brought people together. And for the PlayStation, it was one of the first times that you could really communicate directly with one another, whether it was text through USB keyboard input, the headset mic, which was brand new, or the built-in team commands in the interface that were there. And this game, much to my surprise, brought people together. Lifelong friendships have come out of this. People met their spouses and are still married. I still get mail and messages from these guys. So this emotion, this esprit de corps, camaraderie, that emotion. People still play SOCOM. They have worked out ways to hack, you know, to this ghostly server support. It's not a server, but they're still playing on PlayStation 2 because they really, really liked the feel of the game and the way it made them feel. And then finally, there was South of Midnight. And that emotion was all about hope. It is hope. Hazel goes from being, you know, almost arrogant, beaten, unhappy, to a harbinger of change in her neighborhood. Her power of action is heroic. She can't wave a wand and change the entire world. But she gives us the message that if you do good in your own neighborhood or in your own backyard, that's going to spread. It will ripple. And then other people will follow your example. And that will ripple. And pretty soon, even people who aren't magical weavers are making a positive change. So, critical reception. A lot of people liked it. I won't bore you with reviews. I do want to address the idea or the sentiment that, well, there's not a lot of new mechanics. My argument is a simple story, well told, is its own reward. You don't see movie critics telling directors, well, you should have reinvented the camera for this. It would be much better if, you know, this was made, you know, you should make your projector out of, you know, Spam or whatever. You don't always need to invent a new mechanic or feature set to tell a good story and be effective. So how did this feel to me, which is the least important consideration of all? I think it came pretty close. I think it came pretty close to my intentions. And I have to give another shout out to Compulsion, brilliant developers, so lovely. when I was facing significant health challenges during the last half of production on South of Midnight, the death trip to the south, the 4 questions, all of the extracurriculars had really been infused into the studio, and they didn't disappoint at all. So, fails and pivots. Unavoidable mistakes. We all make them, and this game was no exception. So I talked about the magic system, strands, and we made all kinds of prototypes where you could connect things in the world and then run and bounce on the strands and get more altitude, and you could make sticky bombs and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, this is kind of like Spider-Man. Didn't I say this is not Spider-Man? It's turning into Spider-Man. So we didn't do all those things, but we did use it to in the realization of how your powers were displayed, how they were realized across all the levels. This is a pretty simple follow the line to your objective mechanic at work. And you can't really tell from this image, but strands are very lacy, calling back to all the needlework and weaving and crochet that women used to do in the South. Let's see. Boss fights. Wow. There are some pretty good boss fights in this game. I thought they should be systemic, like AI systems that react to exactly what you're doing. And there is some of that. But in the end, a lot of it is scripted for dramatic effect. Still works. No one can tell. Just do that. I recommend it a lot because we went through bosses much more quickly after we were trying to develop bespoke AI for them. The case of the psychic surgeon. This is you. You're healing the land just by moving through it. If you meet your objectives and can move on to the next kingdom or the next region of the South, you've left a path of healing behind you. I had the idea that we should use a quilt kind of interface that could show you stitching up the wounds in the land, and it would be really great. You could see your progress in the UI. We didn't have time. But we did have this bottle tree. This is your personal psychic bottle tree, and that's where you hang or place all of the tragedy that you've harvested and removed from each of the kingdoms. And in the end, that was the right thing to do. It was cost effective, it's beautiful, and everyone liked it. It worked. Yeah, okay. So, by this point, you have probably noticed that I am not a sassy young black woman. Although I wish I was. So this was the most difficult part of the design and the direction. I always just imagined Hazel was a black woman. Obviously, there she is. She's black. And I just assumed, being naive and optimistic, that everyone else was seeing what I saw, right? All the considerations about authenticity and, all the consultants that we could work with. But there was initial pushback because people were like, I'm not black, I don't feel comfortable. And I'm like, well, let's get comfortable, right? There are plenty of people that will help us. And boy, did they, right? At the end, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much what I expected, but God knows what kind of mistakes, what cultural offenses I would have made if it had been entirely up to me. So I'm super happy with the chorus of voices that we had working and collaborating with us. It was a very, very long road, but almost nothing worth doing doesn't involve a long, hard road, and I'm glad we took it. So earlier in this presentation, I mentioned this house, which almost killed me. And I was doing this while making South of Midnight, so I was all over the place. So eventually, I finished, and I did most of that, like all of that. That was me. Even the azaleas, right? I'll take credit for all the garden. This was an analog version of making a game. It's full of tragedy and horrible surprises, and it costs a lot of money and nobody listens to you. But there it is. And this, not only is this my place to go when I finally retire, it is a place to go for all of my spinster and confirmed bachelor friends in the industry who work too hard to build healthy relationships and don't want to die alone. So in town, people call this, oh, what are you doing? Oh my goodness. I don't want to touch it. People call this the wedding cake house, but I call it my lady Leviathan. And I just love her, just like I love the way South of Midnight turned out. So I was talking about doing hard things and why we should do them. And sometimes you do the hard thing and the game does not ship. God knows that's happened to me enough. I mean, games that have been completely certified for Gold Master, suddenly the market for the N64 collapses. They're not making any more cartridges. It's the end of cartridges. Nice game, though. Thanks. Thanks for the last 2 years of your life. But I look at it this way. Anyone read Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities? Okay. All right, sisters. In Invisible Cities, 2 characters, Marco Polo in the court of Kublai Khan. And the Khan tasks Marco Polo to travel the world and bring him stories of cities that the Khan is never going to go see. And Marco Polo brings these stories back and relays them to Kublai Khan. And they're about places that are clearly impossible. Impossible. But sometimes they're real. Sometimes that game ships. And it doesn't matter to me, and shouldn't to you. Do your best work. Take the hard road. People will rise up to meet you. And in the end, our paths will cross. And that is it. Here's my vintage MSN email address. Feel free to contact me. Thank you. What happened?
What?
Something bad?
I feel bad. I feel old now because I have a Hotmail and hotmail.com. Thank you so much for this amazing talk. I have a quick, easy question. Do you plan a PlayStation release, please?
I plan nothing at this point.
Fair enough.
It was a game made, sorry, the game was made primarily for Xbox game service, subscription service, which is funny because, some critics were like, oh, you didn't sell 10 million copies. I'm like, it's Netflix for games. It's out there. It did its job. So,
what are the 2 other games from the South?
One I love, one I do not. You tell me which. Gabriel Knight, point-and-click graphical adventure game, set in New Orleans, presumably, and Kentucky Route Zero, which is set in the same sort of location as the Colossal Cave, the original adventure game that shaped so much of what we do now. So props to Kentucky Route Zero. Gorgeous.
What about Resident Evil 7?
No. And also, there have been flirtations with the South, like Red Dead 2, right? There's like a sort of fictionalized version of the South, too. Not the whole game.
What about Mafia 3?
Yeah. I stopped playing after Mafia 1, which I thought was the pinnacle of gaming design greatness. So maybe, I don't know. Is it in the South? Which one? What part? Oh, well, I've learned something here today. Thank you.
Oh my god. All right. How do we take more risks in game development?
Well, I'm not saying I've done this, but the trick of it is to take the risks without any producers knowing it's happening. We can talk later about my 5-step approach. No, but seriously, I mean, if you can't convince people to do, take a risk, there are probably legitimate reasons. But if you know that it will make the game better, it's not going to cost any money or time, you should be able to try it. And there are lots. Sometimes there's lots of free time lying around, people that would help you, but don't have full-time tasks. Use it.
Many story-based games avoid UI so as not to break immersion. What are your thoughts on the use of UI in a story game?
Well, it really depends. I mean, I'm an old school gamer, so I like a certain amount of icons and meters and, levers, whatever on screen. Should you have a mini map? Do you need it, right? It's like everything else, right? If you're making the game, and at some point it starts to tell you what it wants, right? And what it doesn't want, because what it doesn't want isn't working. And what it does want is right there. You feel it when you play. Your focus test members, they are participants, they know it when they play. Pay attention to that. So, I mean, if you put in like placeholder AI, or UI rather, and it doesn't work, it's a good thing you haven't spent a lot of art hours making it really beautiful. So do everything you think you might need, and then take away what the game tells you you do not need.
That's such a UX answer. Love it. Follow up to the UI question. I read or heard somewhere that the game was going to have more of a diegetic UI. Is that true? Why, if so, why did you move away from that? Diegetic.
Well, sometimes diegesis, is that the word? Diegeticness, or whatever. It is a lot to manage. It doesn't come together the way you think, and then you are still going to end up making a bunch of icons and meters. The focus in South Midnight was all about story, emotion, authenticity in the South. So again, it kind of fell under that. I don't feel like we need to really reinvent or work too hard to do away with what works already. Hopefully it will still feel familiar to players 10 years from now. But I do like a diegetic non-UI when I can get it.
Are there any questions from the people in the room? I'm happy to repeat it if you want. If you don't. Yeah?
I mean, I'm mostly asking this from one Florida boy to another. Florida born.
Hang on, I'm gonna give you a mic. It's gonna be easier actually. Put my steps in.
So, from one Florida born boy to another, I feel like in this very European crowd, there's a lot of negativity negativity or a lack of knowledge about the South broadly. And my thinking is that the lack of knowledge might lead to, negative feelings or concerns about the South. So I guess my question is, what would you do, whether in foresight, hindsight, what have you, to spread knowledge or greater interest about the folklore of the South?
Wait.
So I was in a documentary about this, and it turned out okay. Just between us, I recognized that something was off, right? I was divergent in some way when I was very young. I learned to speak watching the evening news with Walter Cronkite. So accentless Midwest English, because there's definitely a prejudice against the Southern drawl, which I could have had, and in LA, it would have made me a target, the fact that I was from Mississippi already made me a target for ridicule in a good-natured way. But, it took me 30 years to realize, you know what, y'all, it's fine. I don't need to be drunk to talk like a Southerner. So, it's true. It's true. So now I tell people all the great things about the South, and it's improved a lot, right? I mean, it's, still not a great economy, still, a lot of poverty, still #1 in incarceration, though. Yeah, prisons for pay. But it's actually a magical place. You just have to give it a chance. Sometimes you need a tour guide. I'm happy to help. But overall, the South is a great place. But there are also, there's just as much ugliness and negativity anywhere you go in the U.S. And I'm only going to talk about the U.S. because it's my country, so I can do that. I wouldn't judge anyone else. I don't know if that answers your question. I mean, I totally came out as a Southerner, right? I'm like, everybody knows now. It may be a bad idea.
What kind of playtesting or user research did you do for this game?
Well, we had a lot of testing, that's for sure. More dedicated test groups. Like all over the place. There were at least 2 that weren't local to us. We had our internal test department. We were all playing it all the time. Externally, our consultants, Donna Washington, you saw her picture. We actually were in collaboration with Sweet Baby for a while. We had authenticity and sensitivity experts in Microsoft. I don't even know how many. Microsoft supported us by giving us a lot of focus testing for sensitivity and cultural appropriation, et cetera, et cetera. There were a lot. And I don't know all their names, but everyone I met was awesome and totally spot on. But this does remind me, because in our quest to make a really authentic game about the South, we hired this sound designer man, who a sound recorder, and he was deployed to all of these dangerous places in the South. And every couple of months, I would be copied on an email. He's like, "Hey, I got all these bird songs. It's an oriole. It's like, I've got the cicadas. I'm in another swamp." I don't know where he is now. He's probably still out there somewhere.
How do you compromise when the director pushes their decisions, but the team feels differently? How do you decide which direction is right?
As I mentioned, I used to go almost entirely by instinct. Some success on the first game. And then I spent the next 3 to 5 years trying to figure out what had I done right, what choices were actually good choices, and why did I make them. So I still listen to my instinct, but I think once you develop the listening ear to pick up on what the game is trying to tell you it wants to be or where it wants to go, it becomes a lot easier to sort of parse and evaluate suggestions from the team that may not have been part of your original vision. And that's fine. I think as game designers and directors, we have to develop the ability to recognize genius in others and when to not steal it, but when to embrace it, right? It's like you're going to have a million more ideas before you die. Plenty of time. And if you can't put them in a game, write a book, right? Start a website. that's my thinking on that. Just be humble and have no ego about it, and it'll be fine.
There are no egos in the game industry. What are you talking about?
I've never met one.
Me neither. Can you give more examples of things you thought were okay to have in the game, but a cultural consultant told you not to?
Me, no. But in spite of having no filter about things I say, I'm definitely filtering right now. It was less about what I didn't anticipate. It was more about giving everyone time to make choices and propose things and then vet them. Because if you're given an army of consultants, you don't need to be on the front line for every decision. Let them help. And then, of course, my inner designer is laughing because I said, yeah, we can't do that. But you let people, you don't learn without trying. So you want people to always feel like they're part of the team, they're part of the vision, and it doesn't, all the negativity and the critical evaluation does not need to come from the creative director.
All right, last question. The South has a very diverse folklore. How did you pick which stories to tell?
Well, there are quite a few cryptids in this. We really wanted to include the Boo Hag, and she's in there, but you only see her in her human form. So I'll leave you with that mystery. Because even with Microsoft money, you don't have infinite time, and you have to ship someday, and so we did. So there's a mystery Boo Hag somewhere in the game, and there were a bunch of other cryptids that we wanted to include, but the game was too big. I mean, it ended up being more than 10 hours, and the target was 10 hours. And in the end, we decided we had the strongest creatures for the stories that we could come up with to tell about them. And that's, it's sad, but there's many, many more cryptids in the South. So maybe somebody will make a sequel one day.
All right, and we have a comment saying, thanks for the amazing talk. And that person is very inspired. And I think I am too, and hopefully more people in the room. Can you please thank David? That was great. Feel better?